Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Tsunade sighed as she stared at the patient before her, baffled at what had happened to the young female shinobi before her, who was considered the most sadistic torture expert just below Ibiki. At first, it didn't seem much at the time when one Mitarashi Anko had not reported in for a few days, since many assumed she was feeling under the weather due to the cold sickness that was sweeping through the village. However, after a few days of rest, which was required to get rid of the cold past, and the woman still didn't show up, Tsunade sent Anbu to investigate. What they found and reported back was not what she expected. Anko had been quite literally screwed into some form of coma with a shit-eating grin on her face, with a lot of drool coming out of her mouth in waves. Her purple messy hair was even messier. Her eyes had a far-away look, like she had just castrated or killed Orochimaru, only it was 10,000 times better. She was on her bed but with her hanging in the air. Dried cum was caked onto her, and Anko's thong panties had been used to bind her wrists while she mumbled, "Pleasure sama," repeatedly. Tsunade originally wanted to put Anko as a victim of rape when she had learned of her current state, but after seeing the woman up close, the Hokage doubted it was anything but rape. Still, it did seem serious if one of Konoha's top shinobi was taken down via having crazy with some unknown person in the village, since not many people would even remotely try to be near Anko unless they absolutely had to. The test on the samples of the leftover essence left by the UAL assailant was unreadable, as the man had used his chakra manipulation to remove any imprint of DNA from it, and the stuff inside of Anko was too long gone to get anything. Kurenai had been infuriated when she heard the news and demanded that in the name of her friend's honor that the man be caught before having his manhood publicly removed by a rusty scalpel. While tempting as that was for Tsunade, she had no witnesses to the time the snake mistress went missing, and the samples they had were blank as a sheet of unwritten scroll paper. All they knew is that whatever made Anko go into such a state of UAL bliss was that the man had incredible stamina, meaning it had to be a shinobi of high-ranked caliber. Unfortunately, for Tsunade, all the Anbu and Junin were all present and accounted for in their present spots, homes, and/or won missions the night of Anko's disappearance. Chunins had no interaction with Anko, and if they did, it was only during rare occasions with the Hokage in her office. Accusing a genin was simply out of the question, since it was impossible for them to ambush, much less have with the special Junin from the torture division. So, seeing the only option available, Tsunade asked Ino to use her mind transfer jutsu, and see if Anko got a good look at the man that banged her like a drummer does a drum at a festival dance. "Are you sure you want me to go into her mind, Hokage-sama?" said the 18-year-old Ino, who, while wanting to help get justice for a fellow female shinobi, didn't think that it was a big deal since Anko clearly enjoyed it. "We can't rule out it was a rape, Ino. I just want you to make sure. If it is rape, I need you to tell me, but if it's not, well, then keep what you see to yourself, and tell Kurenai to get off my back," said Tsunade, smirking at Ino, who was blushing slightly at that, since what she would see if it was not rape would be watching someone's memory of blissful. "Okay, but I still say you're trying to corrupt me into being a pervert like Jiraiya-sama tried to do to Naruto," said Ino, only to see the death glare by Tsunade, who was a hair's breadth from hitting Ino, and sending the girl to the hospital via air Tsunade's fist. "I'll pretend I didn't hear that this once, but you better get out of here before I change my mind," said Tsunade, as several tick marks appeared on her forehead. After that comment, all that was left of Ino was a few blonde hairs, and a very nervous yet smiling afterimage remained. Konoha Hospital. Ino was somewhat reluctant to step inside her fellow shinobi's mind, considering that there was probably a lot of stuff inside Anko's head that the Yamanaka clan members shouldn't see. However, she had her orders from the Hokage, and to disobey would result in treason, thus getting her in trouble. "Here goes nothing. I just hope I don't regret this. Ninja art, mind transfer jutsu," said Ino, performing the seals, and entered Anko's mind. Little did Ino know that after she performed the jutsu, the same person that had ally dominated Anko had entered the room, and picked her up to take back to his place. Enjoy the show, my dear. When you return to your body, I'll see to it you get your own experience, said the figure's muffled voice, letting out a dark chuckle before they went, poof, to the man's humble abode. Inside Anko's mind. As expected, when Ino first entered Anko's mind, it was completely shut down due to the impact of what she had experienced a few days ago. Ino walked the treacherous mind that had snakes lying on the ground limp, unconscious, and/or sleeping by the looks of it. These snakes must be a part of her, considering she was Orochimaru's former apprentice, but what kind of power forced them all to fall limp like this, said Ino, walking through the comatose mind of Anko. Her answer soon came in the sounds of repeated grunts and gasps coming from a simple rice paper door that was partially opened yet was dark inside. Walking cautiously up to the door, Ino slowly opened it enough to stick her head in, only to be suddenly forced into the memory, seeing the events that took place. Anko's first memory of the encounter. It was late into the night as Anko was currently at her favorite place, that was the dango shop, eating dangos and drinking sake, like usual for someone with her reputation along with her background. Not many places served her food or were friendly, but this was, and the guy running it wasn't about to throw out a customer, who was a healthy form of profit in her buying so many dangos. The special Junin had at least consumed a good half a jar of sake, feeling slightly inebriated from it since it was the really potent stuff. Reaching down for her last dango, she stopped when a chakra string pulled it from her intended grasp to a man in the shadows of the bar, and took a big old bite out of it. Anko was so surprised and slightly drunk that her lateness in reaction time allowed her dango thief to walk off with a smile on his face towards her that made the female shinobi go into a foul drunken mood. Chasing after the man who stole her precious dango, she followed his chakra signature into a nearby alley, making her grin sadistically at what she could do this guy in an alley where very little could be heard. Grabbing a kunai from her pouch, she entered the alley ready to deliver justice Anko style. Her grin turned into a scowl as Anko walked down the seemingly deserted alley, seeing no signs of her dango thief, and half suspected the man was secretly an ambush, since they were the only ones that could get away with this if they tried outside of the Hokage. And Anko could tell from her thief's physique that the person was a he. If you surrender now, I might just be merciful and not castrate you before leaving you tomorrow morning in the village square, said Anko, hoping that it would cause some kind of fear in her thief and make him reveal himself to her. Imagine her surprise and shock when she sensed a figure behind her throw knockout gas at her, making her fall unconscious. You've been a very naughty woman, Anko-chan. Don't worry though, as what I have in mind will make you happy in the end, said the figure, with Anko seeing only his grin in the darkness before all went black. End of Anko's first memory. So she was raped, said Ino to herself, knowing that when Kurenai heard the news she was going to be livid along with the rest of the female shinobis, who would look at the male half with distrust. The blackness soon changed to what looked like Anko's room, and judging by the range of torture devices in one of the closets, it was Anko's second encounter. Anko's eyes opened slowly, feeling like she just got hit with one of Tsunade's punches for making a "you are so old" joke, when they were both drunk that one time in her office. Trying to comprehend her surroundings, Anko tried to move from what seemed to be a strained position, only to find that she could not, and that she was stomach first on her bed, tied up with something soft yet tight around her wrists. Anko's eyes widened when, during her struggle to move, when she noticed that she was now unable to move. Finally awake, I see, said the mystery voice behind her, still too deep in the shadows for Ino to see clearly. When I get out of here, I'm going to make you beg for death, said Anko, now struggling against her binds while trying to use the Kawarmi jutsu with what fingers she had at her disposal. Ino was now walking out of the memory with a blush that could outdo Hinata any day of the week. She never felt so hot and bothered by this, and was also quite confused as how to approach this to Tsunade about Anko's condition. I'll just tell the Hokage what I saw and let her figure it out, said Ino before she released her justice and returned to her body. Unknown location. Ino felt her mind return to her body and opened her eyes, only to find she was not in the hospital anymore, sitting next to the Anko as ordered to by the Hokage. Instead, She was now staring up at a ceiling she didn't recognize in a room that was clearly not part of the hospital. Trying to sit up, she found herself unable to move her body at all, just like Anko couldn't do in with her situation, except the difference now was Ino was on her back with her bandages she wrapped around her legs being used to tie her down on a bed. "What the hell?" said Ino, struggling to get free only to find her bandages had seals on them covered heavily in thick chakra preventing them from breaking. "You like it? I call it the chakra steel seal. Depending on how much chakra is put into the seal, no matter what the fabric or item, the seal allows the chakra to make things just as strong as steel itself. You leg wrappings I took off of you, for instance, are just one of few perfect examples of it being used," said the figure from Anko's memory, lurking deep in the shadows of the room, grinning at her like a predator catching its prey. "You are the one that raped Anko," said Ino, shocked at seeing the figure before her, even though she was still hot and bothered by what she saw with such things now occurring in her physical body. "Raped? I never raped Anko-chan. I gave her the chance to submit rather than take her by force, and eventually, if from what you and I saw, she did," said the man walking silently in the shadows, still looking at Ino like he did Anko. "You forced her into submission. You made her," said Ino, blushing as she could complete her sentence since it sounded so weird to her. That was the word you were going to say, right? Or was the word you wanted to say, orgasm?" said the man, making Ino blush heavier, and she could feel something warm leaking out of her lower regions. "Damn stupid body," thought Ino, hating her body for betraying her like this. "What do we have here? It seems young bossy Yamanaka." Ino liked what she saw and wishes she were Ed like Anko was, said the man, grinning at her while she looked away, slightly ashamed at her body and herself for letting it tell him what she wanted. "Let me guess, you want me to submit to and call you Pleasure-sama, like you told Anko to call you?" said Ino, trying to get angry at the man, but found the memory of Anko being Ed like there was no tomorrow made her even wetter. "I don't have to tell you to submit, Ino-chan. Your body has already done it for you, and as for calling me Pleasure-sama, I think it goes without saying that the answer is yes," said the shadowy figure, who gave Ino a familiar grin that she had seen before, but just could not place her finger on it. "Hentai," said Ino, blushing, while the man in the shadows just grinned wider at that little statement, as if it was an honor to be called one. "You're one to talk, Ino-chan. If I remember correctly, when we were in the academy just before we graduated, you asked Hinata to try using her Byakugan, and see the Uchiha Tem's crotch to see how big he was," said the man, making Ino blush again as her eyes nearly jumped out of her sockets at hearing that embarrassing incident back in her still developing years and her curiosity about boys. Poor Hinata had reluctantly tried to use her Byakugan since it was taboo for all of the members of the Hyuga clan to use their bloodline limit like Ino asked. However, instead of finding Sasuke like the Yamanaka girl wanted, the Hyuga heiress had ended up using her eyes to see Naruto's crotch line, and within just mere moments of seeing what was hanging in between his legs, fell over with a nosebleed that would put Jiraiya to shame if he saw a teenage Tsunade. Thus began the days of the shy pervert known as Hyuga Hinata. "How do you know about that?" "Only a select few people knew about that incident that got me in trouble with Iruka for acting irresponsible," said Ino, eyeing the man carefully, wishing she could see more of him in order to get some idea of who it was that was now standing before her in this embarrassing position. "Because Ino-chan, I'm the one that Hinata Haim saw with her eyes," said one Namikaze Naruto, standing out of the shadows to face Ino, who was looking at him in disbelief. Naruto was now 18 years old and had taken up his father's last name, much to the disapproval of the council, but were silenced when Tsunade showed copies of legitimate marriage records of his parents getting married, and Naruto's official birth certificate that had been signed by Kushina before she died from complications when going into labor. Still, it didn't stop the various members of the council from demanding that half of the financial assets of the Namikaze clan to be given to the village to compensate the losses suffered at the hands of Kyuubi. Fortunately, Naruto had gained favor with the Fire Daimyo for defeating Akatsuki and killing Uchiha Sasuke, which Sakura was not happy about, and still wasn't to this day. So the council couldn't go after Naruto's family fortune or anything with the Namikaze or even Uzumaki name on it without getting the Fire Daimyo's full attention. Not only that, but Fire Daimyo had then demanded that all of the villagers and shinobi, who had gone against the dying wishes of the late Yondaime needed to be punished. As such, many of the shinobi in Konoha were demoted, had their pay reduced, and a large amount of their assets seized to give to Naruto. For the civilians, they were punished by being forced to surrender half their family belongings, some were forced to close down their shops if they owned one, and make a meaningful public apology to Naruto no matter how much they didn't want to. All in all, Naruto had hit the jackpot, and was going to become the next Hokage with the backing of the Fire Daimyo despite the protest of the council. If anyone finds out you're behind this, you could lose your position to become the 6th Hokage of Konoha, or worse, the council could take things away from you. So why are you doing this? Said Ino, looking at Naruto curiously before she blushed at realizing he was shirtless and his ripped muscles were quite a sight to behold. You make it seem as if Anko was the first woman I dominated to becoming my mate, said Naruto, grinning, his eyes flashing red with demonic lust in them. There are other women besides Anko-san, said Ino, wondering, who else had fallen to Naruto's UAL domination. Only one other, and she actually embraced this idea of mine before this even happened, said Naruto, walking over to the side of the bed caressing Ino's shocked face. Who? Said Ino, wondering what woman would let Naruto do all these things. Hinata Harem, of course, said Naruto, as it had been the simplest thing in the world. What? Said Ino, not believing that only Shai Hyuga in the history of the prominent clan would even suggest Naruto dominate women and to do as he pleases. You remember back when the old hag gave me that mission with Hinata 3 months ago for that C-rank mission? Well, let's just say I learned that Hyuga woman has quite the fire burning in her once shy soul, said Naruto before giggling perversely like a certain super pervert did at the hot springs. You had with Hinata, but Hiashi hates your guts. There is no chance in hell he will allow you to be with Hinata, said Ino, wondering how Hiashi never learned of this. More like made love. It wasn't like she bent over and I mounted her without her saying I could. Though I don't think she would have minded as long as it was me, said Naruto, as he raised an eyebrow, and looked up in thought about it. Flashback. Damn that old hag for making the two of go on a C-ranked mission with minimum pay. Do her a favor, my ass, she just wants me away because I caught her drinking sake, when Shizune told her she couldn't or else. Well, it doesn't matter because the joke's on the old bat since I made a shadow clone to tell Shizune about it, said Naruto to Hinata, who saw her crush, grinning mischievously at her. Naruto-kun, what exactly did you do? Said Hinata, hoping it wouldn't get him into too much trouble. Who, me? Well, I just had my clone tell Shizune, show her a picture, and then I might have placed stink bombs in the secret spots where her sake would be, said Naruto, his grin growing even wider and the faint sound of something like, damn you, followed by, Naruto, at the end made it all the sweeter. Won't Tsunade-sama get mad at you for that? Said Hinata, knowing that her Hokage could punish Naruto harshly if she wanted to. For what? Making her do her job. She promised Shizune that she would focus on being the Hokage more than being a lazy drunken gambler, and as a future Hokage I have to make sure that the current Hokage keeps her promise. Besides, even if she tried to punish me, I still have a lot of blackmail to keep her off my back, and FYI, there are some pretty crazy pieces of blackmail in my possession, said Naruto, showing some of the blackmail in question, making the Hyuga heiress gasp at each picture and blushed a shade of red never before discovered. I suppose you're right, Naruto-kun. She really shouldn't have used her Hokage hat in that manner, said Hinata, as she made a mental note to make sure Naruto washed the Hokage hat before he wore it when he took up the mantle. The two arrived at their destination ahead of schedule and completed the assignment just as fast before Naruto sent Gamakichi to tell Tsunade they completed the mission with a PS that she was still a drunk old hag. Another faint shout of a few choice words could be faintly heard moments later, and Naruto knew his mission to tick Tsunade off had been done for the day. Now Naruto and Hinata were now in a medium-sized town with hot springs, which both shinobi agreed to partake in since they felt it would benefit them before heading home. Naruto went to the male section while Hinata went to the female section, which were both empty at the moment due to a small festival celebrating the town's holiday. Hinata sighed as she relaxed in the hot springs, finding it seemed to have the power to free her of her worries as long as she stayed in its depths. Her worries had been her father and him getting Hanabi ready to become the true heir to the Hyuga clan, meaning if Hinata didn't do something fast she would lose out in being with her Naruto since her father was trying to get her married to some rich man with political influence outside of Konoha. A man who was a little over twice her age, no less. She had found out about Naruto's hidden heritage thanks to Tsunade, but Hiashi said he would rather be dead, and his body being dissected by the Kumo Raikage then let Hinata marry a Namikaze. Apparently, Hiyashi's hatred for Naruto ironically didn't come from him being the jailer of the Kyuubi, but rather the Yondaime for beating the Hyuga clan head when they were still Junin, and the late Namikaze used the 1,000 years of pain jutsu on the Hyuga in front of their future wives, no less. The embarrassment from that experience infuriated Hiashi to no end. Naruto, however, didn't care about Hiyashi's feelings in the matter and flat out told the Hyuga head that if Hinata wanted to date him, it was her choice, not his. To even add further insult to the injury of Hyuga clan head's pride, the Namikaze heir flipped the man off while a shadow clone did the very same embarrassing jutsu that had been the bane of Hiyashi's existence since it was first used on him by the Yondaime. Hinata was gratified to see that Naruto stood up for her and wished she had the courage to tell, much less show her love, how much she actually loved him. It wasn't until she had finished that train of thought that her eyes widened with a perverted idea and used her Byakugan to find Naruto alone on the male side of the hot springs lying contently against the rocks. Maybe I can find a way to show Naruto-kun just how I feel about him, thought Hinata, perversely blushing up a storm before using her stealth-like skills to jump over the barrier and onto the water without making noise, sinking slowly afterwards, walking towards the blonde man in front of her with predatory eyes. The hot springs had been ruined on both sides of the field due to the rampaging hormones of both shinobi, though no one knew it was them since they had left in the afternoon after secretly making it back to the hotel. Upon looking at the chaotic scene of the place, the old man of a mayor, who ran the town, noticed a large amount of money in an envelope with a note signed anonymously stating that the ones who destroyed the hot springs were sorry, with the money going towards it being restored. The hot springs would later be restored and twice as large due the amount given. End flashback. Ino's face was now beet red and her body had become hot from hearing the story, with her becoming wetter by the minute. On the way back to the Leaf, Hinata and I talked about what we did at the hot springs, with me telling her I could have more than one wife to revive the Namikaze clan. She didn't like that, but I told her that if I did have more than one wife, they would, according to my clan's rules, be more like mistresses than anything. Hinata, of course, is going to be my wife since I already asked her to marry me, and naturally she accepted, but we're going to do it in secret so the Hyuga clan can't interfere with some political loophole that they would try to create. The trick is now finding other women to become a part of the clan, who will be my mistresses, if you will, said Naruto, simplifying things for Ino. So you and Hinata both had, and now you're conquering every other woman in your path to make them into your future wives, said Ino, not understanding why Hinata would allow this considering how much she loves Naruto. You're catching on. And who says blondes are dumb, said Naruto before grabbing one of Ino's well-shaped legs and gave it a nice feel with his fingers. Yeah, well, when I get out of here I'm telling the Hokage about this, and when she finds out, she'll have you neutered in order to punish you, said Ino, smirking at Naruto, as she half expected him to panic and run around worried, thus making enough noise to possibly draw attention to the situation she was in. Are you sure about that? Said Naruto confidently, making Ino's eyebrow go up at the man's calmness. Why wouldn't I be? It's not like I'm going to bend to your will like that Anko lady did. Besides, even if you somehow did to me what you did to her, you'll have every female on full alert, and once they find out it's you they will make you wish you were never born, said Ino, smirking triumphantly at Naruto, who for a brief moment seemed sad. That hurt Ino. You know fully well that the village has tried to do that since I was born. Or have you forgotten? Said Naruto, his voice no longer holding its playfulness, and Ino had flinched as she realized her choice of words. Tsunade had revoked the Sandame's law less than a year ago because she felt it had done more harm than good to the demon vessel. She made a public announcement about it just before the one about Naruto being the Namikaze heir so the people would understand the full ramifications of their past actions. The remaining rookies, except for Sakura, were outraged at the village, and more importantly at their parents for letting this happen to the man. The older generation tried to find an excuse saying they didn't know any better, but the glare from the younger half shut up their half-baked excuse for an explanation rather quickly. Wrong choice of words. Sorry Naruto, said Ino, wishing she hadn't been one of the kids his age that had been cruel to him. It's all right. You didn't mean it the way others would have. Tell you what, I'll make a little deal with you, said Naruto, as some of his energy had returned. A deal, said Ino, as she felt Naruto now resumed his touch over her legs, finding that while she herself never liked her legs, hence the bandages, the feel of Naruto's fingers on them stirred something in her. More like a bet, I suppose. I bet I can make you feel so good having with me Ino that you won't want to turn me in just so you can have more of it later on in the near future, said Naruto, moving the lower part of her purple dress away more, revealing her now very wet. What happens if you lose? Said Ino, looking suspiciously at Naruto since he had a real luck streak when it came to betting with people. You turn me into Tsunade and have her let the female shinobi populace deal with me as they want. However, if I win, you become my next wife, mistress, like I made Anko the other day, and you will not tell anyone what you know, said Naruto simply, as if that was all there was to it. Well, I suppose it wouldn't be that bad considering your UAL prowess did make both Hinata and Anko happy, so at the least I gained the most out of this with a good. Okay, you got yourself a deal, but I don't want to be taken like Anko was, like some slave, said Ino, motioning her head to her bandages that tied her to the bed. Oh, you mean this? This was done so you wouldn't run when you first woke up. I mean, can you even blame me considering how you woke up from your mind transfer jutsu that had you recently used on Anko? Said Naruto, making Ino blush with embarrassment since she had freaked out at not being in a familiar environment. So how do you want this to go down then? I told you already that I won't do this in my current situation, said Ino, wondering if Naruto would keep his end of the agreement since not many men would surrender taking a hot woman like her in such a dominating fashion. You think I forgot already? For shame Ino, I'm hurt. Shadow clone jutsu, said Naruto, making 4 clones, who began untying Ino while the original one pulled up a chair to sit down on. For a moment there I thought you were going to, said Ino, waving her hand at the 4 clones, which dispersed, and Naruto chuckled at her. No, as you said, you don't want to be taken like that. What I have in mind is different. I want you to dance for me while stripping, said Naruto, making Ino blush at his words. You want a striptease? But I don't have any underwear on, said Ino, wondering why he wanted her to, and quickly looked around the room for any video cameras should this be some kind of prank. Not even a bra, so what I'm looking at is all you, said Naruto, wiggling his eyebrows at Ino, who blushed even further red since she walked into that one. Shut up. Just because Sakura had her bra stuffed until she was 17 doesn't mean I did the same, said Ino, blushing further, and then her eyes widened in shock at revealing her best friend's biggest secret. Let me guess, you weren't supposed to tell that, right? Don't worry, I won't say anything since everyone already knows thanks to Hinata. She saw Sakura's bra with her Byakugan one day and told me about it after Pinky called me names for no reason. I think it was her time of the month, as they say when a girl is angry for no apparent reason. Besides, you're not the only one now, as Hinata hasn't worn any since we made love during our mission, and Anko will only have hers on hand to be dominated with, said Naruto, seeing Ino relax at his words about Sakura since she was still the blonde girl's friend even if the pink-haired woman was no such person to the others. Though the blush came back full fold about Hinata and Anko no longer wearing panties. I guess we could get started with this little bet, though I wouldn't mind if some form of music while I did this, and so I could get into a dancing mood, said Ino, folding her arms along her stomach line, which pushed her out more in her purple attire. Of course, said Naruto, snapping his fingers, and instantly sensual music began playing around them, with a few sound barrier seals keeping it in the room. Why do I get the feeling you've been planning this from the start? Said Ino, as she had begun swaying her hips in a sensual motion, and began getting into a strip-teasing mood. Your body's not complaining. In fact, if I could take a guess, I'd say would be more than happy to come near me, said Naruto, seeing the line of Ino's juices now going down her leg like a river. Perverted baka, said Ino, though it was more whispery than her usual volume her voice took when talking to people, as she moved over closer to him, moving her body in a lust-filled dance of sensuality that made Naruto excited inside. The girl removed her upper clothing slowly as she danced in front of Naruto in the most ual manner her body could create, moaning as she squeezed her and shaking hair along his crotch when she moved close. The Yamanaka girl gasped at the feeling of Naruto, hard member in his pants rubbing against her skirted rear, while her mind now wished to see the real thing that the other two women felt up close. She suddenly gasped again when Naruto grabbed both her giving both mounds a healthy massage. Ino was now feeling her ever horny body growing hot with each passing moment, while a part of her mind was telling her she couldn't do what she wanted to do right now just yet. With only half the act complete and needed to get to the second act before moving on to the grand finale that she knew Naruto would enjoy. Damn Ino, your kick hips can do this to me anytime, said Naruto, kissing her neck as he began to lick her earlobe, making Ino moan louder, as she moved her hands down, taking off her skirt, making her totally his eyes. Just you wait, there is more to come, said Ino, panting as she grinded her against him a few more times before she quickly turned around and unzipped Naruto's pants to let her see the massive hard-on that was pointing at her. Sliding down to her knees, Ino licked her lips, as she was beginning to see why Hinata was always blushing heavily around Naruto when they were younger. Hell, if Ino herself had known Naruto had something this massive, she would have blushed too, and would have jumped him when they were 16 to show him the time of his life. Grasping the large thing in her hands, which looked tiny in comparison to it, Ino began licking the head like a lollipop, and began moving her mouth along the tip before taking what she could into her mouth. As for Naruto himself, he was in heaven once more, like he had been with Hinata, and then again with Anko when she ed him off. Hinata did it with grace that told him she was patient to get what she wanted. Anko, he knew, was the sly, seductive type, as she had done it to him even when tired, and Ino herself was a ravager-ing on him like there was no tomorrow. Ino's nature was to always get what she wanted and get them quickly, since she hated to wait, which was why her first relationship with Shikamaru didn't work. Right now Ino wanted Naruto to come in her mouth soon, hence why she was now stroking him with her hands, then using her and massaging his testicles while she continued ing him, using her tongue to stimulate the pleasure along the bulbous head. After a few more minutes, Naruto came right in Ino's mouth with so much entering that the woman couldn't swallow it all, and to prevent herself from choking pulled back to let the rest cover the front of body. Not wanting to lose out on her tasty treat, Ino took what she could to her mouth with her fingers while rubbing the rest of it on her body, and was making her feel even more excited. Now the real fun begins, Ino-chan, said Naruto, grabbing Ino and lifting her by the waist as she legged locked with him, squealing as he did that to her. I'm so horny right now, Naruto. Please put that massive thing inside of me before I go insane, said Ino before she was dropped on the bed and Naruto took off his pants fully so he could enjoy this moment better. You know this will hurt, right? Since it's your first time, said Naruto, getting lined up with Ino, grabbing his member and wetting it once more with her juice that was leaking out of her womanhood so it would be easier for him to enter. It's a good thing we're both lubricated then, or else you would probably have ripped me in half, said Ino, getting a solid grip with her legs around Naruto's hips before the blonde juggernaut moved in for the kill and to the blonde girl's virginity in one swift moment. Ino screamed in pain like she had been stabbed with a kunai, only this pain was from the inside, and she began to wonder if this is how someone feels when they get hit by the gentle fist style of a Hyuga. Fortunately, for Ino though, the pain passed, and after a few seconds of a non-screaming girl connected with him, Naruto began thrusting into the Yamanaka girl. This time Ino's screams were one of pleasure, as she lifted her hips occasionally to meet Naruto's to heighten the sensations further, and loved every moment of it. "You're tight, Ino. I know you like having an iron grip on men in your life, but this almost ridiculous," said Naruto, thrusting faster, making Ino scream even louder at the wonderful experience of Naruto's meat stick in her. "Keep going, Naruto-kun. I can feel you in me. I love every second of it," said Ino, as her S moved up and down with each thrust, almost hypnotizing the man pounding into her. "Call me Pleasure-sama. Only call me Pleasure-sama," said Naruto, as he pounded harder, making Ino inhale at the sudden influx of movement, as she didn't think he could go any faster. "Pleasure-sama. Pleasure-sama. Pleasure-sama," said Ino instantly, as if it were the only words she knew, while her body rocked with one organism after another while he still kept pounding into her, making each sensation of the orgasms go higher than before. "Do you want to become my mistress wife? To striptease for me when I ask? To always grind your hot against my when I ask for it? To never wear bandages? To get yourself pounded constantly like a bitch in heat when I want?" said Naruto, increasing his pace, making Ino scream almost erratically with each thrust while her nails were digging deeply into the mattress. "Yes. Yes. I'll be your mistress wife. I'll strip for you whenever you want. Wherever you want. In private. In public. Oh, for the love of Kami. Give me a child, Pleasure-sama. I want your child like Hinata does," yelled Ino, while the rational part of her buried in her head could not believe she just said that. "Here it comes, Ino-chan. Welcome to the family," said Naruto, lifting up Ino so her legs were now on his shoulders and his hands now on her hips, with one hand moving to her cheek before channeling chakra into it when finally came. Ino's voice box was pushed to the limits, as Naruto came inside of her, as it made her feel relief for the fire inside of her that the blonde semen had the power to put out, and from the look on the demon vessel's face the feeling was mutual. Pulling out, Naruto felt more of his baby making seed cover Ino like a second skin, which the blonde girl rubbed over her skin, and licked what she could off her fingers. "Thank Nar Pleasure-sama," said Ino, correcting herself at what to call Naruto from now on when they were like this in the future. "My pleasure, Ino-chan. I hope you don't mind, but I have to leave you here since moving you would most likely be painful to you, and I need a few days head start in making sure no one knows it was me. Right now no one knows you're here, so I'll leave it to Hinata to, conveniently, find you," said Naruto, putting a hand on the side of her leg before he sent chakra through her to take out the genetic identification needed to pin this on him. "I understand, Pleasure-sama. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I can't risk Hokage-sama finding out and try to rip that incredible thing of you. I know you could probably grow it back, and in doing so would make it even longer, but I think she would make sure that it would never happen," said Ino. Her eyes had a flash of fear in them at that, though she also imagined Naruto switching places with someone else like Kiba at the last moment, since the man just to dog-like for his own good, and needed less testosterone in his life. "Agreed. Just relax and sleep for a few days since you'll be too sore to move if you do. Oh, one more thing before I go, I need to ask you, Ino-chan," said Naruto, as he got his clothes on ready to head out on his next conquest. "What is it, Pleasure-sama?" said Ino, her eyes fixated on his chest with the shirt he had on unbuttoned, giving him a very rebellious and why look to him. "Does Tenten wear a thong?" said Naruto, smiling, as he gave Ino a hint into who he was seeking out to be his next mistress wife. "I don't know. I think so. I saw her once at the hot springs and I thought I saw something black and thin, but before I could get a better look she came in to get changed." "I'm sorry I failed you, Pleasure-sama," said Ino, looking away slightly ashamed at herself, only to have Naruto cup her chin and give her a kind smile. "You didn't fail me at all. You gave me the information you know and I have to just go with it. It's not your fault in any way," said Naruto, caressing her cheek while Ino gave it little kisses here and there. Leaving the room to let Ino drift into a realm of UAL bliss-inflicted state, Naruto went to another empty room, and went out the window after making sure no one was around. He couldn't help but smirk at the thought of Tenten, and how she would soon be his very soon due to her breakup with Neji nearly 6 months ago after broke it off saying it wasn't working. After Neji tried to gently break her heart, Tenten broke one of his nuts between his legs with a swift kick to the spot in between his legs in a moment of anger. It didn't help Neji that Tenten was wearing leg weights at the time, or that the weight on the leg was a little over 50 pounds, give or take a few ounces. Don't worry your heart anymore, Tenten-chan. Soon you will see that when a Hyuga fails to make you happy, a Namikaze will always is there to give you what you need, and of course, much more, thought Naruto, smirking evilly, as he couldn't wait to see if Tenten wore a thong or not. If she did, he hoped it was black, and if she didn't, well, it didn't hurt either way. At a distant training ground, Tenten shivered suddenly as an unknown sensation now ran through her, but it was hard to tell if it was a good thing or a bad thing, and the female weapons master could only hope it was the former. Naruto was in the forest now, training in private with a sword, feeling he need to keep his skills sharp when he wasn't having with various women of the leaf. His plans for Tenten had been put on hold for a few days as expected after Ino was found a few days later by Hinata after Naruto told his future wife where to find her. Tsunade was now becoming very annoyed with the situation since Ino was abducted from the hospital to be ally dominated like Anko had been. Inoichi had been infuriated that some guy had taken his daughter's innocence, but strangely enough for him, Ino was calm about it, and told her father she didn't know the identity of her attacker. Though Ino would have preferred demonic machine any day, while knowing Hinata and Anko, when she had woken up, would second the motion. As for shinobi women throughout Konoha, they were now pairing off in groups using the whole safety in numbers idea to beat back suspicious men, who might ask them for a date only to be this UAL deviant. The men themselves felt it was unfair that because of one guy among them that they couldn't get any action with the woman each one desired. Even the married men were put under suspicion of being unfaithful, which to them was also unfair since they had never cheated on their wives nor do something like that in their life. Naruto knew he was pissing people off both sides of the gender fence, but he didn't care since he was certain they wouldn't catch him. Inoichi for one could not use the mind transfer jutsu on his daughter since Kyuubi had set up a special mental barrier defense to keep any and all Yamanaka clan members from entering Ino's head to learn of him. Naruto of course had been accused given his stamina, rank, and of course demon sealed inside of him that was possibly influencing him. Naruto of course was not surprised since it was bound to happen sooner or later, but the beauty of the whole plan was that Hinata was his alibi for the time Anko was dominated, and again for Ino. The alibi of course did seem slightly shaky given Hinata's practically fanatical devotion to Naruto, but it was further corroborated slightly by Shizune, who had paid the two a quick visit, seeing them eating ramen together in the living room of the Namikaze estate. Of course, had Shizune stayed longer she would have seen that the Naruto in the room was in actuality a shadow clone to give the blonde man a reasonable alibi. So for now, Naruto was in the clear, though he was sure there were several females still looked at him with suspicion, and to further make sure that they stopped looking at him that way he headed off to the forest to get his own private training done. So far, Naruto was a decent master of ninjutsu, taijutsu, and for the most part genjutsu after Kyuubi reluctantly admitted that his vessel's survival along with his own was better secured by teaching it. Considering foxes were notorious illusion masters, Naruto could find no better teacher, and the substitute that could have put him on her radar despite Hinata's protests. Naruto swung his sword expertly against a clone version of himself, clashing blades, as they fought each other with deadly precision, and kept trying to slay the other. Many were surprised that Naruto even took up Kenjutsu considering how much patience it had required and the lack Naruto had. Or so they had originally thought he had. The only real problem the blonde had was no one ever fully taught Naruto due to obvious reasons and forced the boy now young man to find said teaching elsewhere on missions. One such mission was an A-ranked object retrieval mission deep into the heart of Water Country's ruins when Naruto was 17, to find the lost sword of an ancient sword master, who was said to wield a living sword that was so great that it was more terrifying than the user. Another reason it was A-ranked was the rumored reports of a group of Iowa shinobi been seen in the area looking for the blade to learn its secrets. Naruto along with Shino, Shikamaru, Kurenai, Kakashi, Ino, Hinata, and Neji had been dispatched to get the sword back to Konoha before Iowa did to their village. Naruto couldn't help but think back to the moment he had discovered the sword after he had the ground beneath him collapse during the fighting with the Iowa shinobi only for him to find the sword near him afterwards. Walking up to the sword sluggishly to pick it up and take home to be give a proper owner, and clearly not him if the council had any say, Naruto felt a jolt of some kind of power rip through him when he touched the hilt. The result of it had made Naruto come face to face with the spirit within the sword, who seemed to be judging him, as they stood before the other, and after what seemed to be forever the sword proclaimed the young blonde man its master. When Naruto asked why, the spirit of the sword simply said, "You wish to understand of my power as you learn it while many others would simply use my power wildly and that alone makes you worthy to be my user." After a bright light flashed over the leaf shinobi from the spirit, Naruto soon found himself standing amongst his comrades in a daze, as if he had no idea what had just happened. A blood-covered sword in his right hand, the same sword's sheath in the other, and the various body parts of what was left of the Iowa shinobi force with one survivor screaming at him in terror at what had happened. Looking around further, Naruto saw his friends looking at him in a terrified fashion while Hinata just looked at him in shock, but nothing to indicate she was afraid, and for that he was forever grateful. Even more so when he dropped the sword when he fell to his knees at the sheer shock of what he had done. Only Hinata had come to comfort him despite Kurenai's protest thinking the Kyuubi had possessed him and it was unsafe for her to be near him. When they got back to Konoha and a full report was given, the council tried to take the sword away from Naruto stating it would be given to a more worthy candidate upon further study of it. However, when they tried to take the sword from Naruto, they found that it was stuck to him like glue, and refused to part with its new master. Naruto told them that the sword had chosen who would wield it and to take it from him would prove useless since it would still serve no other master within Konoha's walls long after. The council reluctantly caved on the notion of letting Naruto have the sword, but banned him from using it at all unless it was in Water Country, and even then there were special circumstances to make that happen. Of course Naruto didn't listen since the sword wanted its new owner to learn and vice versa since what was the point of having a sword if you couldn't use it? It might as well be destroyed and melted down, which would have been more fitting for the blade than simply not being used. Which was why Naruto was out in the forest alone away from the council's prying eyes so the old farts wouldn't try to reprimand him for disobeying them. The sword spirit had long since passed from the blade after Naruto mastered the forms it taught, but it still had a protective power over the weapon to ensure only Naruto would wield the blade. Sensing someone approaching, Naruto and his clone stopped in mid-motion before the clone moved swiftly to cut the tree where the spy was hiding and fall down. The said spy flipped through the air landing in a few feet in front of the original, who now kept a well-trained eye on the figure's form, and inwardly smiled at how lucky he must be. "You know you didn't have to sneak up on me while I'm trying training Tenten," said Naruto giving her a kind grin while inside it was nearly demonic. It seemed the mouse had come to visit the fox. "I'm just making sure that you are not doing anything or possibly anyone that you should not being doing Naruto." With this mystery man having his way with the female populace of Konoha, I felt I needed to come by, as I have my own suspicions about you, and I'm not leaving until I'm satisfied, said Tenten wearing a mix of shinobi and civilian clothes that were similar to what she wore when she was genin since she was off duty today. "Oh, you'll be satisfied my little mouse, and before we're done here I'll make you do more than squeak my name," thought Naruto, who physically shrugged at her before dispelling his clone, and motioned her to come at him with her own weapons if she had them. You want to spar with me? Even though you know my profession with weapons and my mastery of them? Said Tenten, raising an eyebrow at Naruto, who smirked at her since she was clearly one of the few people left in Konoha that did not believe he had skills with a weapon. He had skills. Oh my yes, Naruto had mad skills. How am I supposed to get better if I don't face someone strong? Besides, what do I have to lose if I train with you? You're strong and so am I. Together we get stronger, said Naruto casually, which made Tenten think about what he just said, finding it to be true. Okay, I suppose you have a point. However, if you try any funny business, I'll make sure you can't have kids, said Tenten, since she still suspected Naruto of both Ino and Anko's UAL misfortune. Though neither woman would call it that. You know I hate perverts, right, Tenten? I mean, have you ever seen me with that book Kakashi always reads or Ebisu secretly does when he thinks no one is around to see him read it? Said Naruto, raising an eyebrow back at her before getting into his sword stance. Well, I suppose you're not a pervert, but my warning still stands. Said Tenten, pulling out her own sword from a scroll and getting into her own stance. Trust me, Tenten. After today you'll see I'm not a bad guy everyone tries to make you believe I am, said Naruto, his eyes holding a mischievous twinkle to them that made Tenten cautious. Within less than 10 seconds, the two began their friendly spar. Konoha Hospital 20 minutes later. What do you mean Anko won't press charges against this guy? Said Kurenai, looking at Tsunade with serious eyes while Hokage returned it just as serious. Just like I said, Kurenai, Anko won't press charges, and added to the fact as all she'll call him is, Pleasure-sama, I have no means to identify the guy. Not to mention Ino is in the same boat as her and the blonde one refuses to press charges even if she does know who the man is, said Tsunade, seeing the two women in the shared room on separate beds, as they were now talking excitedly about their experiences with this, Pleasure-sama. Well, if they won't, then I'll find the guy myself and deal with him in my own way, said Kurenai, walking out of the hospital to find the culprit responsible for making her friend this way. Starting with Namikaze Naruto. With Naruto and Tenten, Naruto's sword clashed with Tenten's. As they pushed against each other, the blonde kept smirking at her like he knew something she didn't, and it was getting on the bun-haired woman's nerves. It was like looking at a fox that had just caught a big juice rabbit, and right now Tenten felt like the rabbit that Naruto had caught. I'm beginning to become annoyed by that smirk of yours, Naruto, said Tenten, trying to push back against her opponent, who just kept smirking. Sorry, but I just can't help it for the surprise I got for you, said Naruto, making Tenten scowl at him before going on the offensive yet again for the third time that day. What's the surprise? Or should I fear for my life in asking? Said Tenten, tensing her muscles should he try anything funny as they deadlocked once more. This, said Naruto, his eyes flashing red with slits for pupils making before kissing her right on the lip, which made Tenten jump back only to bump into another body behind her that was his shadow clone, who caught her hands, and then pinned them behind her back with the sword thrown to the side. That's not funny, Naruto. Release me and I may not kill your clone by hitting the one thing all men value the most, said Tenten, struggling to move out of the clone's grip or substituting him for something else, but the clone had a hand on both of hers and the other was on her. Soft yet firm, said the Naruto shadow clone before giggling perversely while Tenten blushed at being touched without her permission. Within 15 minutes of Naruto's departure, Kurenai entered the field looking for the blonde demon vessel, and gasped when she saw a near-sleeping Tenten leaning back against a tree. Rushing over to the fallen Junin, the Genjutsu mistress swore silently at missing the assailant that may have been her intended target. Tenten, who did this to you? Said Kurenai, seeing the girl had the same look Anko and Ino had when they were admitted to the hospital. Pleasure-sama, said Tenten, her eyes glazed over in bliss just as Anko's and Ino's had been, making Kurenai scowl at the frustration setting in before picking the girl up to take to the hospital for Tsunade to take care of. Konoha Animal Veterinary Station 2 hours later. Inuzuka Hana enjoyed her work she did when she wasn't out being a shinobi for Konoha, and right now this was one of those times, as she took care of a pet bird that had broken its wing. She felt this place was the one spot outside of her clan home that she could feel safe from the slowly growing number of shinobi women being sent to the hospital for what was rumored to be ULI-dominated rape, or SDR for short. This place, due to its name obviously, was constantly active with people coming in with pets, or other types of animals that needed treatment, thus leaving no room for any form of screwing around that may occur. So she was quite surprised when one Namikaze Naruto showed up with a badly wounded raccoon in his arms looking concerned. She knew Naruto was a kind man despite how he ironically chose the profession that was being a shinobi, and she had to admit that he was quite handsome. Even now rumors were spreading that the next Hokage to be was dating the Hyuga heiress, much to the Hyuga head's anger, if from what she heard was true, and that Hiashi was not able to even walk straight for 2 months due to having a pair of chakra-enhanced fingers sent up his. She couldn't help but laugh at that part when she first heard about it, and felt that if the shy Hyuga deserved anyone to balance her out, it was the chaotic force of Namikaze Naruto. Hey Hana-san, can you help with this raccoon I found? It was wounded by some traps set in the forest, and considering that foxes and raccoons are distant cousins, I couldn't help but save the poor thing, said Naruto, who gave the animal to Hana, and allowed her to check on the animal's foot where the trap had caught it. Well, aside from the damaged foot, the little guy should be alright, and after I treat it for the injury you can take it back to the forest area where you found it, said Hana, as she began treating the wounded raccoon with some antibiotics and wrappings. That's good. Maybe I ask the Hokage to let me go to Suna to visit Gaara and see if he would want it for a pet considering his past history, said Naruto, looking at the raccoon while looking at Hana's rear end at the same time, finding it was just Ramenish. Yeah, I made up that word, so what? Naruto could just stare at it all day, and when he was hungry enough he was going to dive onto it. Before you do, you should look to see where its home is, and if it doesn't have a family I suppose you could, said Hana, only to be interrupted by Kurenai rushing into the door and looked like she was ready to hurt the first person she saw. Naruto, said Kurenai. Her voice sounded mixed with anger and suspicion at seeing him here, since she had spent a great deal of time looking for him after dropping off Tenten at the hospital. What did I do? Said Naruto, raising an eyebrow while mentally he knew that she knew he was the culprit, or at least suspected him now more than ever. Now would be the time to use the way of the fox in tricking people to save your hide, and more importantly, the very thing between your legs that every male treasures, said Kyuubi in Naruto's head, with the said vessel nodding in agreement. Tenten is in the hospital again and it's your fault, said Kurenai, laying the bait in order to prepare the trap she was going to set for the Kyuubi vessel. So that's her little game, is it? Well, let's just see if I can't turn this trap against Kurenai, thought Naruto, whose mind was now working on making Kurenai look like an idiot while physically he looked shocked along with Hana. She is, said Hana before looking at Naruto with some suspicion. I didn't think I had caused too much damage to her body when we sparred earlier in the forest, said Naruto, sounding concerned, and made it look like he was, but knew that his latest mistress was just happy as Jiraiya had been when he was peeping in the hot springs. So you admit being with her in the forest? Said Kurenai carefully, with her suspicions of the blonde growing even further. Well, yeah, I was training by myself with my sword and she appeared being suspicious of me just like you are now. She was dressed in a mix of shinobi and civilian clothes, so I was able to get in a light spar with her for the day since she's an expert with weapons. I didn't think I had injured her at all during our spar before I left her to do her own thing and found this injured guy in an animal trap, said Naruto, pointing to the injured animal, which was still being taken care of by Hana. She wasn't injured by your damn sword, Baka. She was injured by that other thing you have that is between your legs, said Kurenai, grabbing Naruto roughly by his shirt and shoving him against the wall. Wait, are you accusing me of what I think you're accusing me of? Said Naruto, looking at her with a raised eyebrow, making it seem like he understood what it was she had just charged him with. You're damn right. I don't care that your alibi with Hinata holds up or that Shizune-san can also back it up if only for a few seconds. I'm taking you to Ibiki and I have him make you confess to everything you did her along with the other two, said Kurenai looking at him with murderous eyes, which didn't faze Naruto at all since he was used to such hate. How do you even know it's me? While I admit I spent time with Tenten, when I left she was completely fine, and was standing on her own 2 feet, said Naruto casually since it was true that when he left Tenten she was quite fine. Quite fine indeed, said the Kyuubi letting out a perverted giggle while Naruto had to hold back his. I don't care what you say, I'm taking you to Ibiki and if you resist I'll do the honor of removing something from you that will not be pleasant in the slightest, said Kurenai while Naruto remained calm despite her threat in order to keep his innocence-like facade up. What if you're wrong? Said Naruto earning him a quick push back against the wall by Kurenai. I'm not, said Kurenai pulling a kunai out and placing it against his neck to further make him understand she had no doubts. But what if you are? Tsunade will not look kindly on you for what you did and I don't think Asuma's child will find you to be a stable mother after several sessions with him for retribution for sending me to him, said Naruto since there were times that the people, who were interrogated for alleged crimes were found innocent, and in return the one that pointed the finger got several sessions with Ibiki for saying such lies about an innocent person. Don't try to make me second guess myself, you rapist. I'm not wrong and I will see you suffer for what you did them, said Kurenai before she shoved Naruto towards the door, who seemed calm about the whole situation. What if I could prove my innocence? What if could prove you wrong? Said Naruto not moving with his back to the door, but looking back slightly to stare back at Kurenai. I'd have to say you're a bigger liar than you are a rapist, said Kurenai watching him for small muscle movements should he try to run. Why not take me to the hospital then? If I am the said rapist, then the women will be all weird around me. If not, well, you're going to have to owe me one hell of a public apology, said Naruto knowing that the women will not act all weird, as he put it since his link with them told them already what was going to happen if he came there. Kurenai thought about it for a moment since it would help prove her accusation against the boy even if she could make grounds for the fact he was the last person to be with her before she had been SDR. However, if she was by some unfortunate circumstance proven wrong, Tsunade would have her head on a chopping block for her stupidity. It's a gamble, but it's worth it, if only to nail this damn rapist where it hurts, and when he's caught I'll personally see to it that it does hurt, thought Kurenai before nodding to Naruto that he agreed with him. You guys want me to come with you? Said Hana having expertly taken care of the little raccoon despite the noise around her the two were creating. Just wait outside the hospital since I doubt they'll let the poor guy in. When this matter gets cleared I'll take him to Suna once I inspect the area around where I found him, said Naruto sounding, as if he was going to be cleared of all of this, and all would be well for him. Very clever. You truly are a fox even without me, said Kyuubi now laughing inside of Naruto's head at what he had planned to get this monkey's widow off his back. Damn right. I'll create a powerful mud clone to deliver the raccoon to Gaara while the real me stays here in Konoha. All I would have to do is keep a low profile during the day and not get caught, thought Naruto grinning inwardly at his guest. Konoha Hospital 15 minutes later. Hey grandma, you miss me, said Naruto before dodging a thrown medicine ball used for physical therapy sessions. Damn it Naruto, would you stop calling me that for once in your life? Said Tsunade, as she had gone through the same song and painful dance with him before. There were times Tsunade wished Naruto was not stronger than her as she could wail on him with her fists. What else should I call you other than grandma? Piss poor gambler, heavy drinker and sleeper, the sore loser, or possibly your original title as the legendary said Naruto trailing off a list of names that made Tsunade seeing red at his jabs at her. Why are you here Naruto? I have half a mind to send you to Ibiki or even Anko for a few days once I clear her, said Tsunade reining in her temper, but it was hard to seeing that grin on Naruto's face. Really? I thought you only had half a mind after all the heavy drinking you do with the other half focused on gambling, said Naruto, quickly dodging one of her fists, which hit an unsuspecting doctor coming around the corner. Come here, Gaki, so I can wail on you for that, said Tsunade, who got ready to launch another fist at Naruto only to be stopped reluctantly by Kurenai. As much as I would like you to punch Naruto into next week, Hokage-sama, we came here to get a matter cleared up, and it involves two specific patients, said Kurenai, telling her how Naruto was the last one to see Tenten and how she believed Naruto was the alleged rapists of all three women. Well, while I do find that Naruto doing that is absurd, I do find that the timing is far too coincidental to ignore, and I will allow Naruto to visit them in their shared room. I expect you to apologize when this is over, Kurenai, if you turn out to be wrong, said Tsunade, who gave Kurenai a heavy glare, telling her, you better be right or else. Of course, Hokage-sama, said Kurenai before Tsunade turned to glare at Naruto. And you? If I find out that you are the person doing this, I'll have every female shinobi in Konoha beat the crap out of you for 2 weeks, said Tsunade, giving Naruto a serious look, which he returned several-fold, and made her flinch at her choice of words. You make it sound like old times in my childhood, except different stipulations in terms of my attackers. That may have worked on me when I was a kid, you old bat, but don't try to intimidate me now when I don't get intimidated. And remember that what I can do if you piss me off, said Naruto harshly, as some parts of his childhood concerning near misses with the mob getting him on his birthday popped up, and the time when he was cornered he was hurt only to decimate said mob after he was hit too much. After all this time he still hates being threatened, whether I'm being serious or playful, thought Tsunade while Shizune and Kurenai looked away for a moment. Now let's get this over with. The last thing I need right now is something popping up that gives the council some reason to punish me, said Naruto, walking by Tsunade and brushed by her shoulder somewhat harshly, making the slug princess remember that even though her life wasn't glamorous, neither was his. As Kurenai walked past Tsunade, she felt an iron grip on her shoulder. You better pray that you're right, Kurenai. Because if you are wrong, I will make sure you do nothing but D-ranked missions until you're just as old as I am, even after Naruto becomes the 6th Fire Shadow, said Tsunade, giving Kurenai a sharp look, telling the Genjutsu mistress the current Fire Shadow was very serious. It was then that Kurenai's confidence in this matter started to crack. Hey Ino-chan. Hi Anko-sensei, said Naruto, walking into the room to see the two ladies resting in their beds with Tenten in the third one asleep, resting after their recent activities in the forest. Hey Naruto, what are you doing here? Said Ino, sounding surprised due to the command given to her by the link she had with him. What? I can't pay a visit to you guys when I'm not busy. Oh Ino-chan, how you wound me so, said Naruto in a semi-Shakespearean way that made Anko laugh while Ino just let out a pout. No matter where I see you, Gaki, you always make me laugh at something, said Anko, as her link told her to act like her normal self yet slightly more cheerful. They say laughter is the best medicine, so I figured I would make you two recover as fast as possible, said Naruto before looking at Tenten's sleeping form with a sad look, as if he wished she were conscious to make her laugh. Don't feel bad, Naruto. I'm sure you'll have plenty of time to make her laugh when she is awake, said Ino, smiling at him with an almost loving smile, but still was along the lines of a good friend. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'll stop by your flower shop today and get all three of you something, said Naruto before turning to see Kurenai, Shizune, and Tsunade, looking at them, seeing if they would react to him weirdly or just be their same old selves. Flowers smowers, just get me some dango at the shop and I'll feel much better, said Anko, though secretly she wanted to feast on only one dango and that one belonged to her pleasure-sama. Dango's on my next visit. I'll remember, said Naruto, making a mental note of that when he came in again so she would be even more excited. Well, it seems your belief in him being their rapist is wrong, Kurenai, said Tsunade to the shocked Genjutsu mistress, who saw the look of shock on both Anko and Ino. Naruto a rapist? Naruto is the nicest guy around. He'd beat up a rapist, but not become one, said Ino, pretending to be shocked at this news. Yeah, Kurenai-chan. Sure, the Gaki may seem weird from time to time, but so am I, and I had the hubby Tem as my former teacher, said Anko, who pretended to be ashamed of her friend though inwardly she was more anxious to be with Naruto again and have some more fun. It seems I owe you an apology, Naruto-san. I'm sorry for accusing you of being that man, said Kurenai, who bowed her head in shame of accusing Naruto of misdeeds. It's all right. No harm thus no foul. Now for Tsunade's gambling debts. That's another story, said Naruto, making everyone laugh, except one angry and growling Tsunade looking to pick up something to throw at Naruto. Oh, you made her angry, said Kyuubi, seeing the woman going crazy over at the things that Naruto said. I'll take her anger at me as a sign to leave, said Naruto, leaping out the window with an empty nightstand just barely missing him. The kid had more lives than a cat, said Tsunade angrily at not getting the last say or punch in on the blonde. Oh, before I go I need to take a injured raccoon to Suna to give to Gaara, so I'll be gone for a few days. And as to your remark about me, you owe more money than you drink sake, said Naruto, popping his head up to the window before giving a peace sign, and then laughed as he vanished from Tsunade's sight, who was steaming mad at him. Outside the hospital, Hana was very much surprised when Naruto came to greet her walking down the wall of the hospital, since she never expected him to exit that way, but then again, the man was unpredictable, and it made it quite difficult for anyone to hold him down. Though for her she would imagine it was a plus in attraction towards him, since you never knew what he would do next and leave you guess what his next move was. The poor Nara clan had said, troublesome, around him more than anyone else, and it was funny how he could get the poor clan heir Nara Shikamaru in trouble with his mother just by saying, "Hi, can I crash here for a while?" Hana-chan. In case you haven't heard, I've been cleared of all charges, so let's get out of this place. I was never one for hospitals considering how much death you can smell in there, said Naruto, since his senses were heightened and could smell the lingering death that was always leaking around that place. Okay, here's your raccoon, Naruto, said Hana, giving the caged animal to Naruto, who took it from her, but not before letting his fingers touch hers, and making the Inuzuka woman blush at the contact. She's aroused by you simply by touch. Impressive. Your seduction powers are even more powerful than I originally thought they would be, said Kyuubi, who could smell the honey-like scent now arising from the Inuzuka and came to the conclusion that due to Naruto being the alpha of the village along with his enhanced gifts he was given made the blonde vessel a powerful conductor to attract the opposite. In short, the more Naruto had, the more potent the power would be, and the more women would fall under his spell. Thanks, Hana-chan. Hey, maybe you can help me find the raccoon's lair with your clan's senses, said Naruto, thinking of a reason to get the Inuzuka into the forest alone. Well, I do have to get back to work even though my shift is nearly over, said Hana, who didn't know why she was feeling so excited at the thought of being alone with the man, with the only witness being the animal in the cage in her hands. So, leave slightly early. If anyone asks, you can say you left early to help a good friend in need of your help, said Naruto, giving her an amusing smile that made Hana's cheeks feel warmer at the sight of it. Well, I have been working overtime for a while, so I could use a break. Sure, why not? I've worked hard enough today, so I'll treat myself to getting off of work early, said Hana, smiling at Naruto, who grinned back at his trickster ways, helping him out again. Oh, you'll get off all right. Just not the way you think, Hana-chan, thought Naruto, his eyes flashing red when she turned around to head in the direction of the woods he had pointed to where he came from in finding the raccoon. Forest area. Here's where I found the little guy. I think it's safe to say its home is around here, said Naruto, showing her the damaged trap he had broken to break the raccoon free. Let's look over here first then, said Hana, seeing Naruto put the cage down and walked over to where she was walking. I find this ironic since it's normally the fox that gets hunted by the dog, said Kyuubi, laughing at Hana being Naruto's next target. What's that? Said Naruto, moving closer to Hana while pointing to a nearby river that showed signs previous activity. The closeness to Hana made the Inuzuka getting hot and bothered, as she felt the alpha-like manliness that Naruto seemed to generate, making her heart beat faster. She could smell the pheromones coming off of him, not knowing the Kyuubi inside of him to add to the potency, and as they walked towards the area Hana could feel her body burning up inside. "It maybe the spot and Naruto-kun," said Hana, her face turning redder at calling him that, while her inner dog that was a part of her bloodline was telling her to mate with this man and become his loyal bitch after he dominated her. Shaking her head slightly in frustration, Hana walked over to the spot. Hana bent down to get a sniff of the area for any faint trace of smell that resembled the caged raccoon's own, and was about to continue when she felt a hand touching her. At first, she was going to scream out in protest since she knew who the offending hand belonged to, but stopped when the offending hand began massaging her rear end a delicate manner, and made her moan in pleasure.